Hello students, welcome to Learner's Planet. In today's session, I'm going to start with a new chapter, that is diversity in living organisms. This is the first theory session of this chapter, and here I'm going to introduce about this topic and the concept of classification of living organisms. I hope you understand what is diversity. Let me start with the chapter with the session. Then it will be more better to understand that what exactly it is with respect to the living organisms. This word diversity, it means variety. The literal meaning of diversity is the variety, right? And if it is a biodiversity or diversity in living organisms, then of course what it is going to mean? It refers to the variety of living things. That means the different types of living organisms which are present in our surrounding. That is known as biodiversity. Or in a more specific way, we can define it as the existence or the occurrence of varied form of living organisms, whether it is plant, animal, microorganism, or any living form, any form of living organisms in a particular area. That is what is known as the biodiversity. So this is the perfect definition of this term, right? Now, as continuously I am saying that it is the occurrence of or existence of varied form of living organisms. There is a variety of living things which is present in our surrounding. So, which type of variety? Variation in terms of which characteristics, right? So, these variations, it can be in terms of some physical features, or physiological or psychological, behavioral, any type of characteristics. More precisely, I can simply say the variation in terms of the structure and function of the living organism. If there is the variation, that is leading to the diversity in our surrounding. Now, of course, where such diverse living forms are present, where we are comparing these features, right, where they are found, it can be in any type of ecosystem. See, it can be a terrestrial ecosystem or it can be aquatic, it can be any type of aquatic system where these varied living forms are present. So, if we just look around, right, if you just see in your surrounding, what you will see? There are many living organisms and they all are different from each other. Even when you are present in your friend circle, you can observe the variations among yourself and the other friends, isn't it? It can be related to the structure of your nose or to your eyes, your complexion, or your color, or any feature could be there like height, weight, anything. So when in the same type of organism this much variation is present, then you imagine if we compare these organisms with some other, then what will you find? You will see that, let me give you one example. Let me say if you are your group, like your friends, and you are comparing yourself with the group of monkey, then what will you find? You will see that your own friend circle seems to be similar and the monkey or the other animals group is totally different from your group. So here this diversity range has been now broadened. So this is how we have to compare the diversity at the small scale and then at the larger scale. As this diversity proceeds, if it increases, you will find that the diversity is having a wide range in our surrounding. And with this wide range, I can simply say that the concept of studying these animals or the living forms becomes very, very difficult, right? And for that, the classification is required. So initially, if let me give you some of the examples that how this range of variation is actually observed. So here is a table that is giving some basic characters on the basis of which we can easily understand the concept of variation and the diversity. The first character here is the size. Now this size in the living organism, it can vary from few micrometers to hundreds of meters. Can you imagine? Micrometer is the millionth part of a meter, right? Uh, 10 to the power 6 microns, they form a 1 meter, right? Now you can imagine that what must be the size of this micrometer. It is very, very small, and even I can say that it could not be observed with the naked eyes, isn't it? It's a microscopic form. Whereas on the other hand, the range has been set up to 100 meter. So now you can see that from micrometer to hundreds of meters, how much variation is there. So in this range, different types of animals or the plants or living organisms are coming. Example, microbes. These microorganisms, bacteria, amoeba, diatoms or the cyanobacteria, they are having the size which is present in the range of few microns. Whereas the whale, which is considered as the largest animal on our planet, it is having the size of 30 meters. How much difference is there? A very huge difference, a huge variation is there in terms of size. Similarly, if we compare the redwood trees of California, then these trees are even having the size of hundreds of meters, which is much more than 30 meters. Isn't it? So within the living world, you can observe that there is a lot of variation in terms of size. This is one of the examples. Further, if I compare the age, then this age can be just few minutes to thousands of years. A bacteria, it can divide into 20 minutes. That means a life of a single cell of this single bacteria is simply 20 minutes. Further, it will divide, so the two daughter cells are produced, isn't it? Bacteria, it divides by asexual method, that is by binary fission. So once it splits into two living organisms or two daughter cells, its own life is over, isn't it? So approximately it is surviving for 20 minutes if the favorable conditions are available, right? Further, if it is a mosquito, it can survive for few days, isn't it? Then dogs, the average age is 12 years, tortoise can live for 200 years, and the pine trees, they can survive for thousands of years. So now the limit is from minutes till many years. So this is the further variation you can observe here. Right? Now, if this much variation is there, we can say these living organisms, they must be having very different characteristic features from each other. Therefore, they are able to survive in a different pattern for different number of years, isn't it? The next example is regarding shape. So the shape, of course, as you know very well, it can be irregular to well defined. Irregular, amoeba, it is having irregular shape. Paramecium, it is having slipper shaped structure, isn't it? Now these two are the unicellular organisms, and if you compare the shape of different higher organisms, you can observe the structure, you can observe the shape there also. Fish, it is spindle shape, isn't it? It is a multicellular organism. And now if you compare this spindle shape or animal with some other animal, let us say for example crocodile, then they are having the limbs, whereas which is absent in the fish, isn't it? So basically the simple concept says that there is a lot of variation in our surrounding with respect to different features. The next example could be given here is regarding food habit. Now food habit, it can be either autotrophic or heterotrophic. Autotrophic means the organism is able to synthesize its own food, whereas heterotrophic, it means the organism is not synthesizing its food, but it is dependent on some other organism or in surrounding for their own food. Now in this heterotrophic, further Dependency is it is again it varies from one animal to the another. Like it can be saprophytic, it can be parasitic or holozoic. Saprophytic means what? The organisms, they are feeding upon, or they are obtaining the nourishment from the dead and decayed material. That means they are feeding on simplified material, and this simplification, it has occurred where? In the surrounding, right? Whereas parasitic, even these animals are using the simplified form of food, but from the living host body. Holozoic, it means the organisms are ingesting the complex food material and digesting it within the body. This is what is meant by holozoic. So much difference is present in the simple food habit itself. And among this also there is a lot of variation. It is not only these three parts here. There is a lot of sub-classification or subdivisions among these habits, like which type of food is obtained, which type of host is there, now holozoic, what type of food they are ingesting inside. There are lots of differences. Examples like plants, they all are autotrophic. Then animals, they all are heterotrophic. Among heterotrophic, human beings, they are holozoic. Then the tapeworm and the leech, they are parasitic, whereas the fungus, it is saprophytic. So these are the basic food habits which is resulting in the diversity in the living organisms. Further, if we compare the color, then color can vary from transparent to the bright colors. Most of the worms, they are transparent in their color. Then from this transparent color you can observe very beautiful butterflies and the flowers, which are having different types of colors. The bright colors, there are different range over there, in fact, isn't it? So in this way you can observe that all these organisms, they are showing different characteristics with respect to the particular characteristic feature, right? And such type of variation is providing the uniqueness to these organisms. And when this uniqueness comes among these organisms, it becomes the base for the diversity. Of course, this diversity is affected by the surrounding conditions, right? So this is like what the concept of diversity means, and it can be with respect to what different features. Now, if you follow these particular habits or these basic characteristic features, definitely one thing comes in our focus, and that is that if these diverse characteristics are present in the different organisms, then really it becomes very difficult to understand each and every organism separately. So further, when such type of comparative study has to be done, then one thing is to be clarified here. And what is that? It is that what are those basic features which are shared by these particular organisms. See, we cannot highlight, or we cannot simply focus over the differences so as to study the diversity. Right, we have to understand the common characteristics among these organisms. And when these common characteristics as well as the dissimilarities are compared, they are studied together, then we can classify these organisms into separate groups. And such type of classification, therefore, it helps in understanding the diverse living forms. And of course, we are going to study about that also later on. For now, the point is that we have now I have explained that what type of different varied living forms are present in our surrounding. But exactly on this planet where they are present. Here I have highlighted this point that diversity is affected by the surrounding conditions. So the type of living organism which is present in a particular zone or in that area, it depends upon the different conditions present over there, which may be related to climate, which may be related to the this geographical nature or whatever. So now the point is that where these organisms are exactly found, right? So let me explain that. So the zone where the maximum living forms are present, the maximum diverse living forms are present, that zone is known as zone of mega diversity. You know one thing, there are around 10 million species which has been estimated to exist on our planet. And of course, these 10 million species are not limited in a particular zone. They are widely distributed on our planet. And as the distribution occurs, you can observe that on our planet itself, how much variation is there with respect to the climatic and geological conditions, isn't it? So if these organisms, they are living in the different climatic and different geological conditions, then definitely they must be having the varied characteristics, right? Besides that, I told you, I have explained that there are 10 million species. But you know, out of this, there are just about 1 or 2 million species which are really studied well. Now you can imagine that how much difficult it is to observe and study each and every species, isn't it? And of course, just studying them individually is not so easy. For that, classification has to be done. For that, the concept of similarity and dissimilarity should be maintained. If these similarities and dissimilarities are studied well enough, then only we are able to understand these diverse living forms. Anyways, now these living forms, where they are found? They are usually found in the warm and humid tropical region of the earth. Now, see, first of all, the thing is warm and humid. From this thing, one point should be very clear to you, and it is that the particular living organism, the different varied living forms, they need a particular temperature and the level of humidity in its surrounding. If those favorable conditions are there, the growth of the organism is going to be good enough. Right? Now, on the other hand, imagine that where this warm and humid tropical region is present, it actually runs between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So what is this Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn? I hope you understand it very well. You must have studied it in your geography. So the equator region, the central part of the earth, is considered as the zone where the most of the living forms are present, which provides the favorable conditions for the survival of diverse living forms. And this zone where the maximum diverse living forms are present is known as the zone of mega diversity. Now, which countries will come in this particular zone? It may be like examples are something like Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Mexico, Zaire, Madagascar, Australia, China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. There are so many countries that you can imagine that are coming in this particular central part. Now, of course, besides that, if we move towards the upper part or towards the lower part, there must be there is a variation with respect to temperature, with respect to other conditions also. So over there, some living forms are present which are actually adapted to those particular conditions. So the diverse living forms which are present in different zones, they vary from each other, and therefore they are present, or they will fall into different classes. So now you can understand it very well that why the classification is required. I hope you understand what is meant by classification. See, the classification is actually the arrangement of living organisms into groups, right? Into groups and subgroups depending upon their similarities and the dissimilarities. So, why this classification is required at this moment now? Further, you can understand that, see, there are millions of species, and the area or the zone where these organisms are present, even that is so wide. So to minimize our efforts, so to understand these different forms very well, we have to understand the concept of classification now. So further, I'm going to discuss it about it briefly. So classification, let me define it first. So classification is defined as the systematic arrangement of living organisms into groups and subgroups on the basis of their similarities and dissimilarities. I've already explained about this point, isn't it? So if the and of course the second thing is that the branch of science that deals with the study of classification of organisms is known as taxonomy. So the organisms, they are having similarities as well as dissimilarities. If they are having the similar characteristics, they are supposed to form a single group. Now later, when the dissimilarity appears, right, when some varied feature occurs in these organisms, they are further subdivided into groups, right? So this is how the concept of classification is working actually. Now you just think of it that what could be the importance of the classification, right? So I will give you some points briefly that why it is so important, and then I will proceed with the concept of the classification, or the how this classification is done, right? So students, I have summarized the importance of classification in the form of this particular flowchart, right? So the very first important advantage of classification is that it helps in the determination of characteristic features of living organisms. You know how? See, I already explained that there is the occurrence of diverse living forms, right? And classification is the arrangement of these diverse living forms on the basis of their similarities and the dissimilarities. Now, if we observe these characteristic features, we can determine that the particular living organism will belong to which particular class. So initially, when the classification is done, there is there is an account related to its important features. For example, there is there are the organisms which are classified into two groups, and each group is assigned a particular this list of features. Right. If the organism is having these features, they will come in group 1. If they are having some other features, they will be considered under the next group. Right. So if we know these characteristics, if we understand this type of classification, then actually we can determine the characteristic features of the living organisms in our surrounding. Let us say it can work in two ways. If you observe some this organism in your surrounding, you can identify it easily if you know the classified these characteristic features, isn't it? And on the other hand, if you follow these characteristic features, you can classify them into groups. So altogether, classification can help in determining the characteristic features of a living organism. It can help in the grouping of the organisms. Like there is an entire group of organisms and you can classify them into various groups. So that is what actually mean by the classification. But here, why I am saying it is an advantage of classification? Because we know the characteristic features of the particular group. Right. So you can group the living organisms into a particular group accordingly. Right. This is what we mean by the grouping of organisms. Then identification. If you know these basic features, you can easily identify the organism. Whether let us say there are some different types of plants. If you know the characteristic features, you can classify them into different groups. That, for example, whether the seed is dicot or monocot. These two may be the new terms for you. But if you know the characteristic features, definitely you can identify them and you can subgroup them. Besides that, classification also helps in understanding the diversity. It explains that which type of living organism will actually survive, or will it is found in which type of zone. There are different types of organisms which are living in different areas, different ecosystem, isn't it? So if we know this type of classification, we can understand the diversity in different ecosystem, in different zones, and within the same range also. Besides that, it also helps in understanding the interrelationship among the different organisms. See, each and every living organism is interdependent, right? They are surviving, they are interacting with each other so as to survive in the surrounding, as well as they also interact with the abiotic components so as to maintain the balance in the ecosystem, so as to maintain the balance in the environment. So this is possible. I mean, this type of study, this type of understanding is actually possible if we know the classification, right? If we classify the organisms, we can say that which type of organism is participating in which type of let us say biogeochemical cycle, or how they are interacting with each other. All these are determined by the classification. Besides that, it also help in the prediction of line of evolution. It gives us an idea that which type of organism has evolved out of which type of organism. See, if there are the common characteristic features among the different organisms, that means they must be having the same line of evolution. What this means? What does it mean exactly? It means that the organisms which are sharing the common characteristic features, they must be having some common ancestor in their evolutionary history. So for that, if we have to predict out this particular point, we need to know the important features of these organisms as well as the differences, so that and this is possible only if we understand the concept of classification properly. Further, classification can also help in the scientific nomenclature of organisms. See, the organisms, they are assigned a particular name. They, in the different areas, the organisms are they are known by different names, isn't it? In different languages, the same organism is having a different name. So do you think it is really easy to understand if we move from one place to another? Right? It becomes quite difficult to understand it. So for that, nomenclature is very important. And nomenclature, scientific nomenclature is done on the basis of their characteristic features. Once this classification is known, then definitely the organism is assigned the scientific name, which is related to the name of the group, the organism itself plus the group to which it belongs. So the name of that group is the first name of the organism, and further it is added up with a specific name. So this is how the classification can help in the naming of the organisms. Besides this, classification it forms a base for the other applied biological sciences. How is it possible? For example, the science related to biogeography, then agriculture. See, if we know the classification of pest, vector, or disease-causing organisms, right? Then can't we keep our agriculture field safe? Right? So this is how the classification is forming the base for the other biological sciences also. Moreover, one of the most important feature, or one of the most important advantage of classification is that it forms a base for the communication between the different scientists internationally. As I already said that the organisms, they are called by different names in different zones, so it is quite difficult to understand it, isn't it? And if we just broaden this concept at the international level, then of course the classification becomes the base for the scientific discussion, and this communication between the different scientists is possible through the classification of these organisms. So these are some important advantages or the importance of the classification. Further, I'm going to discuss about the base for the classification and of course the different types of classification system that are studied furthermore. Right? So till then, thank you so much. We'll meet you soon in the next session. Have a nice day. Goodbye.